It's on the CAD Common. So if you go to a file folder, you go to this PC, and then you go to CAD Common, Arch, 13, you got it? 1310, drawings, and then that one right there. Okay. All right. So let's talk about a few things here, all right? The first thing we're going to talk about is line, right? But before we actually start talking about line, one important thing I want to talk about is units in AutoCAD, right? Let me... Okay. So let's talk about units a little bit, okay? And we have two types of units that you'll be using in this class, and then professionally, really. Civil engineers will be using decimal units more, and surveyor units, and the architecture students will be using imperial units, or feet and inches, okay? So we're going to have decimal units, right? And the decimal units are going to be things like 1.0 or 2.7. That's kind of a typical decimal unit format, right? And then we're going to have the architectural units. And those are going to be things like 3 foot 6 inches, right? Or 3 foot 8 and 1/2 inches, okay? So those are going to be kind of the what you'll see in AutoCAD. Now, one thing two things. Number one, we have to set the units that we want to work with in AutoCAD, okay? So by default, when you open the program and you're in a blank drawing that is not a template file of yours, you will be opening it and it will be reading decimal units, right? So anything that you type in, even if you don't have maybe a decimal within that number, will be considered a decimal unit, okay? And we're going to change our units to architectural because most of the we're going to be going back and forth. But a lot of the things that the architecture students will be drawing, obviously, will be feet and inches, right? So we're going to go back and forth. One thing I want to say about architectural units is that in AutoCAD, the inch is the default unit. Okay, so if you set your model space to be in architectural units, if you type in a number and hit enter, so if I type in 5 and hit enter, AutoCAD will recognize that architectural as 5 inches, right? Or if I type in 10, enter, AutoCAD will recognize that 10 as 10 inches, okay? If I'm in decimals and I type in 1, it will recognize that as a decimal unit, right? And it will create that length for us, all right? So let me show you what that means. This is different than Revit, so those of you that are learning Revit, right? The foot is the default unit in Revit, right? So if you type in 10 in Revit and hit enter, it creates a 10-foot length, okay? So I just said that because I don't understand why the same company that generates both softwares can't just make things the same, right? That would be too easy.
Kevin said that they were actually different companies.
They were, eventually,
so
yeah.
Because each group had their own
They wanted to stay different.
They didn't want to change it.
I mean, I get it, but then they merged, right? They're Autodesk. They're the same product now. It's just all of the commands are just very different, which I mean, I guess it's fine, but anyway, why make things more difficult? All right, so let's talk about the idea of a line, right? We've somewhat talked about the idea of a line, but we haven't really talked about the idea of a line with regard to typing in dimensions or setting units or any of that type of thing, right? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set our units, okay? So from now on, you will be going back and forth with your assignments between decimal units and architectural units, okay? And you have to recognize that. So for example, in the assignment that you just did, right, if I look at it, all of those dimensions or all of those coordinates that you created in those assignments you created, those were all decimal units, right? So you opened up a blank file and you started drawing that geometry with ordered pairs, right? And you didn't change units, or you probably didn't even really recognize that you were inputting any type of units. But in doing so, by opening up a blank drawing, you were automatically in decimal units, okay? And so when you were drawing these exercises, you were using decimal units, okay? Does anybody else need the roll? Did you get the roll? Oh, pass it this way, okay. If you, for example, look at one of the exercises that's coming up, in my book it's page 2-11, it might be a page or two ahead or behind yours, but it's called the door arc exercise. You're going to notice that those are in feet and inches, right? So, you know, the direct entry coordinates exercise 3.00, 0.38 were increments that you used. Then you turn the page and we have a 3-foot door and a 1/2-inch drywall and a 3.5-inch stud, right? So first thing, you know, when we open a drawing and we are creating it, now that we know there's something, you know, called units in AutoCAD, you need to be aware of what units you're inputting your information with, okay? So to change your units, we're going to type units at the command line and hit enter, okay? Now if I just start typing units, whether it's at your cursor using dynamic input or just at the command line and you hit enter, right, this drawing units dialog box will pop up, okay? If it didn't pop up, hit escape, 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 okay, and then just type UNITS enter. Okay, does that not work for anybody? All right, so what we're looking at here is our length, our type of length, right? We have architectural. So because this says architectural right here, this drawing that we opened up to use today was in architectural units, okay? So that means, don't hit escape, don't do what I'm doing, just stay on your units dialog box. Let me hit OK. What that means is that if I want to draw a line and I move my mouse in the direction I want to go and I type something like, well, hold on, it doesn't work the other way around. Just one second. Sorry, I was going to show you something, but it will work. It will work in this view, not the other. Let me come back to that. So if I'm an architectural, you know, I could draw architectural units. So this is how we're going to change from architectural to decimal. So if our assignment is using decimals, we'll come in here, we'll type units, change this to decimal, hit OK, and we'll proceed in decimal units. Okay. We want to be, you know, in architectural for today, so we're going to work in architectural. The precision, you want your precision to be at least 1/32, okay? And what this precision means is that if you were drawing something like a wall, right, and the wall dimension is 5 feet and 1/64 of an inch, right, which we likely wouldn't draw that small of an increment for a wall, right? But if I wanted to draw a length that had a 1/64 increment, if my precision was set to 1/32, the smallest increment of line that I could generate would be 1/32. So even if I typed in, you know, 1/64 of an inch, it would jump and it would make that segment of line 1/32 of an inch. Yep.
Why would we do that instead of 1/16? These guys building a piece of tape measure.
Right. Because you're going to be doing, you could be doing details that have smaller increments than that, right? So if somebody is doing millwork detailing or fine carpentry finished carpentry where they have maybe just tiny little increments, or they're 3D printing something, you know, and they need just the tiniest little increment, that's why you would have that, right? Likely you're not going to get that small because you're right? You only have 16 increments on a tape measure, but there are circumstances where you might need something smaller. It just depends on what you're trying to draw, right? So what we're going to do here is we just want to keep it at 1/32. For us, it's a safety factor. If we want to draw something at a 1/32 of an inch, right, we have that small increment to use, okay? For architectural, we're going to have the length as architectural, the precision 1/32. The type of angle will be decimal degrees, and we'll give our precision on our decimal degrees 3 decimal points. So for architectural drawing, this is what your unit dialog box is going to be looking like. Okay, I'm going to hit OK, and by doing that, I've just set my model space to draw in architectural units. All right, now I could type units and hit enter. Oops, and my units dialog box pops up, right? What you may also notice down here, and if you changed your toolbar down here to look like mine, you will notice that you also have a way to change your drawing units down here on your toolbar, your Object Snap toolbar, okay? If this is not showing on your toolbar down here, you can click on this little customization tab, and we have units right there. Okay. So if that has a check mark, your units button, your icon right here will show. Now here's a quick way to change from architectural to decimal. And it's a quick way for me to look down and make sure I'm in the proper units as I'm drawing, right? So if I click on this down arrow, I can click on decimal. Now it doesn't allow me to change precision or any other sort of setting within that unit system, right? But this very easily allows me to change from architectural to decimal, you know, and it gives me a visual cue as to whether I'm in the right drawing units as I'm drawing, okay? So the first step in really any type of actual drawing in AutoCAD is making sure that you're in the right unit system, right? Let me give you an example of a mistake that will happen if you don't set your units correctly. I'm going to open up a brand new drawing here. Okay. I opened up a brand new blank drawing. You're going to notice down here at the bottom that I'm in my decimal units. And again, that's just a default setting for a blank AutoCAD template. Okay. And if I forget about my units, which is likely the #1 mistake the beginning students in AutoCAD make when they go to draw, right? They forget to set their units and things don't work. If I go to draw in architectural units, it won't work. It won't function in this decimal system. So I open up my blank drawing, I go to line, I click, I move in the direction I want to go, and I type 10 foot, enter, and nothing happens. And you think, wait a minute, I know my length needs to be 10 feet, right? 10 foot, enter, right? Nothing happens again. Okay, well maybe I'm going about this wrong, so maybe you type in line. Maybe I'll start it a different way. Click, move in the direction I want to go, 15 foot, enter. Still doesn't work, right? You guys get the idea. The reason why this isn't working is because AutoCAD, while it's in decimal units, it doesn't recognize architectural inputs, right? So if I were to type in something like 15, enter, without a unit associated with it, then it would automatically assume that was a decimal and you know, input the correct length for that 15, you know, decimal inch unit. Yep.
So if you draw something in decimal and then you change it to architectural,
right,
what's the relationship? Is 1 the same as 1 foot?
No.
1 inch?
So they're decimal inches, and so they're 12 times smaller than an architectural unit. So to give you an example of that, when I'm drawing a site plan, or if you're a civil engineer drawing a site plan, you draw it in decimal inches, right? And then when you need to look at that site plan in an architectural application, you have to scale it up by a factor of 12 to make it work for you, because it's 12 times too small.
Okay, so decimal is 12 times smaller
than architectural. Yep. So there's a big difference between the two. Okay, I'm going to come back over here to my first exercise. Here we are. Okay. So big explanation for a really simple topic. Just make sure you're in the right units, right, before you start drawing. And if you're not in the right units and you begin to draw and you're using, you know, the feet and inch marks, it's not going to recognize it. Okay. All right. So we know that we have units. Let me talk about how you're going to input units into AutoCAD, right? And let me just give you. I'm going to erase that real quick. Let me show you what happens. In fact, I'll write these down in a second, but let me just show you what happens. When I initiate the line command, okay, and the line command is our first command. You're all probably pretty familiar with it so far, right? To initiate the line command, I click on line, right? I look down at the command line. It says specify first point. You all know you can specify the first point by using an ordered pair, an XY pair, right? Or you can click to initiate your first point. Click, okay? The way that the line command functions is you have a beginning point and you have an end point. You can specify your beginning point or your end point by clicking. You can specify your beginning point and your end point by using an ordered pair to define them, right? The way that we define a line by clicking a first time and a second time is we initiate our first point by clicking in space, we move in the direction we want to go, and then we type a second dimension, right? Something like 15 foot, enter, okay? Now, uh-oh, what happened? I'm still in decimal, right? I'm going to flip back over to architectural. Okay, there was a good example. Click, move in the direction I want to go, 15 foot, enter, and now you see it happens. It works, right? What if I want to do 15 foot 6 inches? Okay, instead of just typing 15 foot, I'm going to type 15 foot with a 6 after it. Okay, no space. The space bar in AutoCAD functions as an enter command. So if I hit 15 foot enter, it will just create a line that's 15 feet in length. Okay, so I want to type in 15 foot with a 6. The 6 doesn't need an inch mark because if you just type a number in AutoCAD, then it assumes it is an inch increment. Okay, because the inch is the default unit in AutoCAD. So 15 foot for just 15 feet, right? We wanted something like 15 foot 6 inches, 15 foot 6. You know, no inch mark. Okay. So I'll type in 15 foot 6, enter. Okay. If I want to do something like 6 inches, 6, enter. I'm moving my mouse in the direction I want to go, right? I could move it this direction and type in 18 inches, which is 1 foot 6, right? Whether I type 18 inches or 1 foot with one with a foot mark and 6, it's exactly the same thing. It's the same measurement, right? So something you'll see me doing in AutoCAD a lot is instead of typing in 10 feet, I will type in 120 inches, right? The same increment, but I'm lazy and I don't like to lift my hand off of the keyboard, right? And go and find the foot mark and then have to go back and hit enter. So I just type in 120 and that's 10 feet as opposed to 10 with the foot mark, okay? What if I want to do something like 15 foot 6 and 1/2 inches? Whoops, 1/2, okay? I can't hit enter, and I mean space, in between the 6 and the 1/2 because if I do, it will just hit enter and I'll get 15 foot 6 instead of 15 foot 6.5. Enter, okay? So we also have 15 foot 6 and 1/2. Okay, again, no inch mark because if there's a number without a unit on it, AutoCAD in architectural units determines that that's going to be inches. Okay. There's a lot of explaining up front. It's going to get easier, trust me. Any questions on inputting any increments in AutoCAD? Not yet. Okay. You have to do a dash, yes, which again is different than Revit, right? We put spaces in between our numbers in Revit. Okay. So the line, very easy. I click, I initiate the command, I click my first point, I move in the direction I want to go. Making sure that I'm in the correct units, I type in a dimension, 15 foot, enter, right? Okay. Let's say that I want to draw something like this wall, okay? And this wall is 4 feet, okay? It's 4 feet long and it's 4.5, or let's see, 4.5 inches in depth. So let's draw this dimensional wall. I initiate the line command. Let's use the line command to do it. Okay. I click, I move in the direction I go, and I know it needs to be 4 feet, right? But right now you'll notice that my mouse is moving very freely, okay? We want to make sure that our line is very straight. And I think probably your first inclination as a new AutoCAD student is to say, well, I'm going to eyeball it. That looks straight, right? Wrong. We want to make sure that we always create perfectly straight lines. Does anybody remember how to do that? Ortho. Good. Yes. Okay. So while I'm in the middle of my command, I'm going to come down here and I'm going to click on this ortho icon. I can also press F8. Okay. Ortho will allow me to create perfectly straight 90-degree lines, right? Or I guess not just 90-degree lines, but perfectly straight lines that go in all 4 quadrants of the circle. So 0, 90, 180, 270, 360. I click on it, it's gray, it turns blue, and immediately you see my line snap straight, right? So I can't draw any lines that are not perpendicular or orthogonal, I guess. I can only draw perfectly straight lines. So I move in the direction I want to go, I type 4 foot. I could also have typed in 48 inches and it would have been the same thing, and I hit enter. okay? The line command is a chain command, which means that if I continue on in another direction, then it will continue on as well, right? For me to end this command, I'd have to hit escape. My wall is 4.5 inches thick, so in this case, I'm going to type 4 1/2. Enter. 4-1/2/2. I'm going to move back in this direction. I'm going to type 4 feet, but I could also type 48 inches. 48. Enter. And I don't really need to type that last dimension because I can just finish this up using one of my object snaps, right? To remind you, the object snaps allow you to pick specific points on lines, endpoints, midpoints. They also allow you to snap to specific specific points, but it's in certain ways. Like you want a line to be perpendicular or tangent or parallel, right? So these drawing aids, they're called running snaps because they're, if you turn them on, they're always running, right? So here, if I move close to that endpoint, and the endpoint snap is turned on, which, let me remind you, these are our object snaps right here, F3 for a shortcut. I snap to the endpoint, click, and I'm done. Now, my line command wants to continue on, right? So I hit escape, and I've just drawn that length of wall, and those 4 lines represent that wall, okay? All right, maybe we do that again over here, okay? So L for line, click on the line command. I could also come down to the command line and type L, enter, or LINE, enter. Specify first point. I'm not getting these completely dimensionally correct, meaning these lines are not totally lined up, right? We're just kind of playing right now, learning how to use the line command and making things dimensional. We'll worry about lining things up in a little bit, okay? But I would click initiate the first point in the direction I want to go, type my dimension, 4 foot. I could also type 48 inches, enter, move in the direction I want to go. Again, my ortho is on, right? This is something, it's not hard, but you just have to get used to it, right? You have to get used to the idea that you draw something and then, you're going and making sure object snaps are on. You're making sure they're off. You're making sure, different drawing aids are turned off or turned on, So when I'm drawing, I'm not only just drawing lines, I'm not just inputting dimensions, I'm also coming down to my, my object snap toolbar and turning ortho off or turning it on, or making sure one of the object snaps that I want is turned on or off, okay? I'm checking to make sure that my drawing is in the right units, because if it's not, it won't be the right size. You'll lose points on your assignments, which we don't want, right? So we're constantly checking these things, okay? So I move in the direction I want to go, and I type 4 1/2. Enter. I come back here. I type 48, enter, and I close it up, escape, escape. Okay? Is everybody pretty cozy with the line command so far? Any questions on the line command?
Can you say 4.5?
Oh, you had to bring that up, right? You had to bring that up. Not to muddy the water. I like to bring that topic in a little bit later, but I will say it for your sake, okay? So this is a little bit of a tricky topic, right? He's asking, well, if I, draw this, 48-inch line, and then I want to create a length that is 4.5 inches, okay? Not to confuse things, I could type 4-1/2, and that would create a 4.5-inch line. While I'm in architectural units, I could also type 4.5, enter, and I would get a 4.5-inch line. Okay, so when I'm in decimal units, if I type in architectural, it doesn't recognize them and won't create anything. On the other hand, if I'm in architectural units and I type in a decimal, it will convert it into architectural units, right? So if I just type 4.5, it assumes 4.5 inches, right? If I type 4.5 feet, it will do, 4 foot 6 inches, right? So AutoCAD will allow you to type decimals into the architectural world, and it will convert it into feet and inches. Yes. Which is something that you see me doing all the time, because again, I'm lazy. I like to type 4.5, enter. And I don't like to go over here, type, find the dash or the slash or whatever. I like to just have everything on one hand and move very quickly. Okay, so lines, pretty straightforward. Step 1, right? How to draw lines. Okay, so let's talk about, let's see what's next on our list. Okay, lines. Let's talk about, let's do circles next, okay? We are basically going to kind of explore, not all, but a lot of the commands in the drawing tool palette right here, right? We have the home tab, and then we have the drawing tool palette. So our first command is line. Polyline is another iteration of line we'll get to in a little while. But let's talk about circles, okay? We have a lot of different types of circles, and I really, I think probably 1, 2, 3, 4. These first 4 are important, and so we're going to talk about these first 4, but we're not going to go further than that because, to be honest, I really very rarely use more than just these first 2, right? So let's talk about a circle though, okay? When I'm drawing all the other geometry, right, whether it's a circle, an arc, or a line, or a polyline, or a rectangle, or whatever, right, all of the same rules for the units apply. So I still need to be in architectural units, and if I don't have my architectural unit set, then AutoCAD will default to decimal units, right? So if I go to draw a circle and I'm in decimal units and I type in 10, it will do 10 decimal inches, right? So the first thing we want to do is just, again, as we're drawing, make sure we check down here and we want to make sure that we're in the correct units, right? So that'll be step 1. I'm going to delete a few of these things here. So I selected them, right? I use my green selection window to select them. Click, let go of my mouse button, drag my mouse over those items, clicked again, right? Green selection window, anything you touch, it will select, right? And then you can modify it. Modify it meaning delete it, move it, copy it, rotate it, do whatever you want to do. I can also select using a blue selection window just for reminders, right? Click in the bottom left-hand corner and move in the move to the up and right, I guess. Upward, rightish direction. With the blue selection window, I have to encompass the entire object that I want to select in that blue window, right? So if I touch an object, right, I touch it and nothing happens until I fully encompass that object in that selection window, okay? All right, so let's talk about a circle. Circles are pretty easy, right? If I want to use the icon, I can click on this down arrow and pick whichever definition of circle I want to use, okay? If I click on a definition of circle, I create a circle, then I want to create a second circle. If I just click on the icon up here, it will use that last definition to generate the circle, okay? I can also type C, enter at the command line, and that's the shortcut for circle, right? So I can go to the icon, I can go down to the command line, right? I can also come up here to the draw drop-down file menu here and go down to circle, okay? So there's a few different ways that I can, again, initiate circle, and these rules apply to all of the commands. We have several different ways to initiate a command. Yep?
So when you use the command to initiate the circle without going to that, how do you change the type of circle?
That's a good question, right? So if I go through the command line and I type C, enter, okay, you'll notice down here at the command line that it says circle. Specify the center point for the circle, or specify a 3-point, a 2-point, tangent radius circle. So essentially it defaults to the radius and diameter circle, so that would be the one that is created if you just type C. And if you want to do the 2-point, 3-point, or tangent radius, then you would click on that option for whichever one you want to generate. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, so I'm going to click on circle. Let's do center radius. Click. Down here at my command line, if I'm not sure what to do, it says specify the center point for the circle. Okay. The circle can be out here in nowhere land, right? I could click. I could also snap to something, right? Make it on that end point. I could snap to the center point of that line, right? So your first point is going to be wherever you want that center of that circle to rest, okay? So I click. Now it says specify either the radius or the diameter, okay? So if I click on diameter, click, okay, it's going to say specify the diameter. So I can type in something like 48 inches, which is 4 feet. Enter. And that circle has a diameter of 4 feet. Okay. Let me do another one. Circle, I kind of switched on you there using the command line just because you asked that, right? Let me go back to my center radius circle. Click. Okay. So I'm going to specify my center point. Click. And now because I had specified a center radius circle, the default increment that if I enter a dimension now, like 2 foot, enter, it will specify the radius. Okay, so for this circle that's exactly the same size as this one I entered a 2 foot radius and it created a 4 foot diameter circle. This one I specified a 4 foot diameter circle and it has a 2 foot radius. I just did the same thing with different measurements, right? So center radius, click. Now, how do I know if I've chosen a center radius or a diameter circle? Well, it says circle, specify the radius. So the first thing that it names here is going to be what increment or what dimension, what measurement will be used if you type in a number. If I want to change it, I click on the option, right? So this first point says this first part of this command says radius, so if I type in a number now, it will be a defined radius. And the option, it says or, you know, basically click here and you can specify the diameter, right? Pretty straightforward. So if I type in 12 inches, enter, that's a 2 foot diameter or a 1 foot radius circle, okay? Circle, fairly easy, right? Not that difficult to generate. If we zoom into this little area, right, we can work on this little exercise here together, okay? So let's click on circle radius. Our center point will be, and let me zoom out. Did you guys see where that was? It's all the way. Here's our big model space. It's this little exercise right here. So we zoom in there. There it is. Oh, there you go. You got it. All right, so if I want to specify a 1 inch radius, I click on the center point and I type in 1 inch, which means if I just type 1, AutoCAD knows that, or it defaults to 1 inch, enter. 1 inch diameter, circle, diameter, I click here. My diameter is going to be 1 inch, enter, and it's smaller because the diameter is 1 inch, not the radius. Okay, 2 point circle and 3 point circle. I'm not going to worry about these others because I can't think of a time professionally where I've ever generated a circle like this, right? Ever. I think these two are pretty, or the 2 point and the 3 point are helpful, but these others are just not. So let's talk about a 2 point circle, right? So you would generate a circle with a radius, or with a diameter if you have, you know, somebody who's given you a specific measurement. They say, well, you're drawing this building, and on the floor we're drawing a floor pattern or something, right? And it has circles, and these circles need to be 1 foot in diameter. Okay, great. I'm going to create these circles that are 1 foot in diameter and draw the floor pattern, right? So that would be one instance of where you're going to use kind of the radius or diameter to generate circles, right? 2 point and 3 point circle generation is going to be more tuned towards the environment. I have this specific, you know, these walls, or I have something here that you need to generate a circle that's as big as these items. It doesn't matter the radius or the diameter, just make the circle fit in that space, right? You will use a 2 point or a 3 point to generate that, okay? So to generate a 2 point or a 3 point circle, I click on my circle, 2 point, okay, click, and I want to click once, click a second time, and it generates a circle between the 2 points that I click on. Okay, I'm going to hit undo, U, enter, and I'm going to undo that. Remember the undo command? Okay, so circle, 2 point, click, click. Okay, circle 3 point, the exact same thing, but you have a 3 point definition. So circle, 3 point, click, 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 and there's my 3 point circle. Okay. Now, the question may arise, you know, I know how big these objects are, and I'm kind of generating these according to their environment, right? So there are things around them that are sort of bounding them, and I generate these circles in between those bounding items. But what is the final dimension of these, right? We still need to be able to measure them and know how large they are, okay? I'm going to show you how to measure items in AutoCAD. And the command for measuring things is called distance, D-I-S-T. D-I-S-T, enter. Okay? D-I is the shortcut. So D-I enter or D-I-S-T enter. Yep.
Take you back.
Yeah.
The 2.1.
Uh-huh.
I don't know, could you do that again?
Yeah, sure, sure. Let's grab that. Click. I picked it. Delete. Okay, circle, 2 point, right? And then I just picked 2 points where I want that circle to live between. Click, click.
Yeah, in my screen, it's not picking up the middle point.
The middle point?
Yeah.
I don't think it would necessarily. Oh. Okay. Hold on. Let me show you. So the reason. So my AutoCAD, I have my midpoint snaps turned on. Okay. So his question is, hey, I think I know how to generate that circle, right? But when I click on circle and I click on 2 point, that midpoint and that midpoint are not popping up, right? You probably get this endpoint and you get that endpoint, right? Which is kind of the same thing with this circle, but you want to be able to grab the midpoints, okay? Well, it's as simple as turning the midpoint snaps on, your object snaps on. To do that, you're going to come down here to your object snaps. I'm going to use the little drop down arrow next to it. And let's click on settings here. Okay. That brings up dialog box. This will allow you to view the object snaps that are currently running. So if your midpoint is not checked, then it's not going to be running. Is that what's happening? Okay. So just click on that, check it, hit OK. And now when you draw, your midpoint snaps will pop up. You guys will get a sense for what object snaps you like. I don't like all of them turned on, but I do have a few specific that I like turned on. I'm pretty sure that Naima doesn't like the midpoint snap, and so when you guys come into class, she'll probably have everybody in class have turned it off, right? And that might translate into your AutoCAD. Funny enough. Okay. Any questions on the circles so far? Pretty straightforward, right? Okay, so we have the 2 point, we have the 3 point, we have the diameter, we have the radius, right? I was like, where was I going with this? Distance. How do we measure things in AutoCAD, right? You'll notice that I measure everything. I draw something, and then I immediately measure it, right? I'm pretty accurate with my AutoCAD, but it's very easy to type in something wrong, right? And visually, when I look at this, you know, I have a sense of scale, meaning I know that this is a larger circle than that one. So I know that this one's going to have a larger diameter than that one, right? So if this circle that I'm trying to generate is supposed to be bigger than this one, I know I've made an error, right? But other than that, I can't look at it and say, well, I know that's 2 inches or I know it's 3 inches, right? There's just no way for me to grasp that by looking at things, okay? So we have to measure things in AutoCAD. The way that we measure, we're going to use the distance command, D-I-S-T, enter, D-I, enter, or if you're on the home tab here, you can go all the way down here to measure, click, okay? And the way that this command works is that you choose the first point you want to measure from, click, second point, click. So if I wanted to measure that radius right there, click once, click twice, and if I look down here at my command line, it says the distance is 1 inch. Okay, that work for everybody? Pretty important command. you'll do this a lot, right? Revit has its own set of issues, don't get me wrong. But this is one of those things in AutoCAD that you're constantly doing, right? In Revit, you're constantly pulling strings of dimensions to draw. In AutoCAD, you're constantly using the distance command to measure so that you're drawing accurately, right? So I'm going to zoom out a little bit here. And I'm going to go back to this door swing exercise that I was working on. And let's measure a few of these things, right? DI, enter. Click once. I zoom in. I go to that second endpoint. Oop. Click. 4 feet. Yep, that looks pretty good, right? Now, one thing I also want to bring up, I'm going to start throwing in things, right? You're going to see me as I am working in AutoCAD. You'll see me initiate and perform a command, and then you'll see me do the same command again without having moved my mouse, okay? That is using the space bar to hit enter, right? So you'll see me do distance, right? DIST, enter. I will click once, click twice, okay, 4 feet. But then I want to measure something else immediately, but I don't want to go back up and click on measure or type distance again. AutoCAD will allow you to use the same command again if you hit enter right after you execute a command. So if I want to use distance again and I just used distance, I just have to hit spacebar or enter. So spacebar, distance, click, click. 4 inches. Spacebar, click, click. 4.5 inches. Spacebar, click, click. 4 feet. So a command can be reinitiated and re-executed by hitting spacebar or enter, okay, right after you're done with it. And that will work with any command, right? And that's how you're going to get fast at AutoCAD. You click on line, you click, 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 draw, hit escape, move over here, want to use the line again, enter, click, 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 escape, move, enter, click, 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 right? So I'm not constantly going back up, click line, click, 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 escape, click line, click, 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 right? I'm creating lines, click, 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 escape, moving, enter, click, 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 right? Escape. And you're thinking, well, it's not really that big of a deal for me to go from here back up to line, right? But if your movement is in this direction, you're going up here and then coming back down and then moving your screen over, right? Which doesn't sound like a big deal, but every little bit counts, right? When you're working in this, you want to be as fast as you can be. I'm going to select all those items I just generated and hit delete. Okay. All right. So we know line, we know distance, right? So we can draw lines, we can draw them dimensionally correct. We can set our units so that we're working in the proper drawing setting, essentially, right? We can measure things so we know they're dimensionally correct. Are you all pretty comfortable with the idea of object snaps? The midpoint, endpoint, where we go to turn them on, where we go to turn them off, right? Understand that if you're in the middle of a command and you go and you turn an object snap on or off, or you turn ortho on and off, it doesn't break your command, right? So don't be afraid to zoom in, zoom out, turn snaps on and off as you're drawing, okay? Any questions on circles? How we generate circles? Okay. In your assignments, you're going to have an assignment, and it's going to look like this, and you guys have to do by yourselves, because you have to really think about how to do it. They look easy, right? They look easy. Everybody always figures them out, but it takes a minute. These, again, I'll blame Jeff for this, right? But this O-snap drawing is really about being able to use your object snaps and the tools we learned today to generate things, right? So number one, let me just give you a little hint. You can use a ruler and you can measure these if you need to, right? So if you can't figure something out, you can always measure it, right? But if I look at this, right, and I have a 4-inch square, I'm going to draw it 4 inches square, right? And I want to draw this circle in here. How would I generate that circle? Do you get what I'm saying? 2-point circle, right? Yeah. Click, click, you have a 2-point circle. Great. Well, I want to bisect this square, sort of. I need to draw a line from here to here, and it needs to be right from the midpoint, right? So how would I draw that?
Just draw a line, use the object snap.
Exactly. Use your midpoint snaps, right? And your midpoint snaps will take you from the midpoint there to the midpoint there, right? Midpoint there, midpoint there. Okay, so we have a square, we have a circle in it, we have these lines that generate it, or have been generated so far. I have these diagonal lines now. How do I generate those?
Same thing, like midpoint to midpoint.
Yes, you can go midpoint to midpoint, but you also might snap endpoint to endpoint. It's not right or wrong, right? But you're going to draw those according to that. Okay, now it starts to get a little tricky. This circle right here, where does that somewhat appear on this line?
It's right in the center. Yeah.
Yes. So it's going to be probably a 2-point circle from midpoint of that line to midpoint of that line, right? So midpoint snap with a 2-point circle again, right? Now where does that? It's midpoint between there, and you have to perpendicular snap it to the circle, right? So you have to kind of start thinking about the geometry. These are all midpoints, and this one's kind of tricky, okay? Let me just give you a hint on this one. There's going to be some midpoint action going on here, and the snap, we haven't gone through all of the snaps yet, but the object snaps for a circle are the quadrants, okay? So you guys will have to figure these out. I've gone through one of them, but that's kind of the general idea, right? You're going to use the skills that you have so far, right? Midpoint, endpoint, 2-point circle. You guys get the idea to create these, and they make you think a little bit. So just be warned, right? With that, let's actually go through these object snaps and let's look at them. Okay. I clicked on this little down arrow right here. And I'm going to choose Object Snap Settings. Endpoint, we'll pick the endpoint of a line, whether it's at the endpoint of a rectangle, a square, a line, it picks endpoints. Midpoint picks the midpoint of a line segment. Center picks the center of a circle. Geometric center will pick the center of something like a polygon, maybe like an octagon, right? It's not a circle, but it has a center to it. Node will pick, we'll talk about nodes a little bit later, but nodes will pick a node, which is a point on a line. Quadrant, let me show you what quadrant looks like just so you recognize it. That's a quadrant. You see how it's snapping, right? Okay, now let me just give you throw a little wrench in here, right? Circles are obviously, they're gonna have quadrants, right? But an arc is generated from a circle as well, okay? So just remember that. We have intersection, so where two lines kind of intersect, like that point right there. Let me zoom in there. That would be an intersection, even though it's a midpoint also, right? Those two lines are intersecting, that would be an intersection. It's not popping up very well. Let's see if we can get, let me see if I can get, see that, those little crosshairs, intersection. Okay. We have extension. We'll talk about extension in just a second. We have insertion point. This will be for blocks and text. Perpendicular. Perpendicular allows you to draw a line perpendicular from another line. So I can click, move in the direction I want to go. If I want a completely straight line, I will use perpendicular. So one line is perpendicular to the second line, click. Okay, they're perfectly straight, perfectly 90-degree angles to one another. We've got tangent, which will allow you to touch a circle, okay? We have nearest, which will allow you to touch a line. Apparent, we'll talk about this in a second. And then parallel will allow you to draw lines that are parallel to one another. Not something I frequently use, honestly. We have another tool that's called offset. So I use offset, right, more so than parallel. I think it's a little bit more functional for me, okay? What I do want to talk about is extension and apparent intersection, okay? I'm going to hit our right here, okay. Okay, I'm going to hit the line command, L for line, enter. I'm going to click, I'm going to move in the direction I want to go, And my goal with drawing this line between these two walls that I've drawn is that I want to draw a line that very nicely aligns with, oop, I just ruined the secret, didn't I? I want a line that comes out and will align with that bottom wall there. Do you see where my cursor is kind of touching that edge? But I don't know where that is, right? And you know, I come out here and I've started at a point where I can't create a measurable distance. If I look at my distance, it says 1 foot 2 and 1/32, right? We don't want increments like that. My point is not maybe to say 1 foot 2 and 1/32. It's just to line up with the edge of one of these walls. Okay, apparent intersection or apparent intersection will allow, and this also is object tracking, which we'll get to. But if I come down and I touch, you see how I touched it, but I'm not clicking. If I touch that endpoint where I want that line to go to, and then I move upwards, oop, you see how it snaps. There's my extension. Click. Right, so that allowed me to create a line that is directly in line with that line below it. And it's not with that one right there, but I could come up, touch that one, and even though it's fairly close, oh, I might not be able, it might be a little bit too close. Yeah, it's not really working very well, but you guys get the idea, right? So the exercise for your object snap drawing where there's the circle in the middle of the rectangle. Okay, let me just show you something. I want to draw a rectangle. I can click, not click, I'm going to touch. See how I want that to line up? Click, click. I didn't even have to measure anything, I just drew, right? I could come up here to circle. If I wanted to generate a circle inside this square, I could touch, not click, move down here and then touch again, not click, and when those two, you see that? Click. Oh, I have the wrong, I have 2-point circle selected, right? So I've kind of messed myself up. Center radius. Okay, I touch, I don't click, move down, and it might take 1 or 2 times kind of initiating this, right? Click, or not touch, not click, and then when it gets to the midpoint, click. Right? Another way I could have done that, which is kind of the roundabout way, is I could have drawn a line across this from corner to corner. Then I could have generated my circle, right? And then I could have deleted this line. But what's the point of that when I can just use those intersecting lines, right, that hint at a point and snap to it? Okay? So those are going to be apparent intersection / extension. I've already drawn it, so now you see my center snap initiating, right, kind of getting in the way. But you'll see me using this a lot. I come here, I want to be able to find out where those two are going to be starting and stopping, click, right? There we go. Okay. So you'll use that for your assignment as well, okay?
Do you want them in a certain relation, like can all 4 of those on the first page be on one page, or do you want the border?
Yes. So just draw them next to one another like this.
Okay.
Pretty close. Yeah. I'm mostly going to be looking to make sure that they're dimensionally correct, not so much they're spaced exactly this distance from one another. So this will be one drawing, and the others will be all separate drawings as well. Yeah. Okay. Any questions on circles or lines or any of the object snaps so far? Really, I think after you do 1 or 2 assignments, you'll kind of really start to understand them, okay? But if I were to look at that assignment and say, oh, that's a 4-inch square, you know, square. I was going to say rectangle, but not a rectangle. How do I draw that, right? We don't know how to use the rectangle tool yet, but with the line command, I can certainly get pretty close, right? Click on the line, click, move in the direction I want to go, type 4, enter, small, 4, enter, 4, enter, and then close it up, right? And then you think, well, it's tiny, is that right? Is it really 4 inches? Well, let's measure it, right? Distance, D-I-S-T, enter. Click, click, 4 inches, yep, that's right. Space bar, enter, I'm gonna do distance again, immediately. Click, click, yep, it's 4 inches, so that's right. Okay, well, I wanna draw a circle in there. All right, so I'm gonna go up to circle, 2 point, click, click, okay. Now I need to draw that kind of diamond shape maybe. So I can snap to my quadrants and I could do this. Right? Now I need to draw that plus sign, but you know, I'm thinking ahead, and you may have to do these a couple times, but I'm looking ahead thinking I have to draw a line, I have to draw a circle to the midpoint of these lines that kind of create that plus sign in here, right? If I draw a line all the way from here to there, the midpoint is right here, not up here. So I'm going to draw some just short line segments to create that plus sign, and I'm going to have to use my apparent intersection to get that midpoint. Click, click, enter, click, click, enter, enter, click, click, escape. Right? Now I'm going to draw my 2-point circle again. Circle, 2 point. Midpoint, click, click. Looks pretty good, right? Okay, you guys get the idea? All right. I'm going to zoom out. I need to do a zoom extents because my geometry is lost on my screen, right? I can't find it. Zoom extents. I double click my middle roller down twice very fast. Click, click. Everything's back on the screen. Okay. All right, so we know how to create lines. We know how to create circles. I'm going to skip to rectangles. Yeah, let's do rectangles, and then we'll talk about an arc. Okay. Rectangles are obviously a polygon. The icon is up here in the Draw tool palette. If I use the drop down, you'll see I have rectangle and polygon here. Okay. Most of these commands, once you get the hang of 1 or 2 of them, honestly, they're very easy to generate, right? Once you know that you initiate either with an icon or at the command line, and then you look at the command line for direction on where to go, right? And you have to initiate, you have to enter a dimension of some sort, you have to follow directions in the command line. Once you kind of get that, way of thinking where you have initiation, you look down at the command line, and then you execute, really they're all fairly similar, right? I mean, you're creating a circle or a polygon or a square, but really that methodology of just initiating, looking at the command line, and then executing, it's all the same with AutoCAD commands, okay? We'll learn some more nuances on how to best use our object snaps, right? Remembering to use our object snaps, turning ortho on and off, or on and off, those type of things, right? But really kind of that sequence of events is really very similar with all of the commands, okay? All right, before we do rectangles, anybody have any questions? No? Okay. All right. Let's talk about rectangles. So our rectangle command is up here, right? If I use this little drop down, I can initiate the rectangle command by using the icon, click, okay? I can create a free, kind of a non-dimensional rectangle by click, click, there it is, okay? If I want to use it again, enter, click, click, enter, click, click, enter, all right? Or I can come back up here, I can click on rectangle. I can also type RECT, enter, and that will initiate the rectangle command. Okay. Now, I was just creating non-dimensional rectangles up here. If I wanted to create some rectangles that were dimensional, let me show you how to enter the dimensions, right? There's 2 ways we can go about it. I can initiate the rectangle command, click, zoom in wherever I want to create it. I can click my first point, click. Now you're going to notice down here at the command line it says area, dimension, or rotation. Well, I want to enter some dimensions. Here's the first way that I can generate a dimensional rectangle, right? Click. Specify the length, 10 foot, enter. Specify the width, 10 foot, enter. I'm going to zoom back out. Before the command is finished, right, we need to then designate which quadrant it's going to fall into. So is it in the positive, right, or the negative, or wherever you want it to be. Okay, click. So if I wanted to create a rectangle that was, we'll just create some dimension. Click. I come down to dimension. click. Let's do 30 inches, enter by 60 inches, enter. Right, here it is, and now I just need to decide which quadrant it's going to lay in there. Click. Okay.
Go over it again, please.
Yeah. All right. There's my rectangle. I could also type rectangle, R-E-C-T, enter. Specify the first point. I also want to remind you that you can specify the first point by snapping to another object, right? Or if this needed to be in the center of something, I could use my object snaps to help me with that. Click. Okay. So now my rectangle is starting to function. Now I need to define the dimensions. So I come down here to dimension, click. Let's add some dimensions, right? Let's do 48 inches, enter. 60 inches, enter. And then I click to finalize it.
Shelly?
Yep.
On that, you have to click the dimension, or can you just push D?
You can press D as well, enter. Yep, yep. Okay, there's one final, well, and there's one other way that we can create rectangles. And this is probably the most common use I have for relative coordinates, right, in AutoCAD that I use the most, is generating rectangles. And rectangles and lines, you know, drawing commands that we're learning today, they're meant to generate building geometry, right? Site plans, different things that you're going to generate on drawing sheets. So when you're drawing floor plans or elevations or sections or site plans, right, anything like that, you're going to use this geometry to create it, okay? Let's create a rectangle using a relative input, all right? So I'm going to click on my rectangle again, click. I'm going to click to initiate the first point. Now for my relative input, instead of typing D or clicking on dimension, I'm going to type at. You guys having nightmares? Back to relative input, right? At, and I could do something like, you know, 60, 60. Okay, so at means that the next dimension, 60, 60, is going to be measured from this initial point I clicked on, right? So it's from that initial click, 60 up, 60 over, right? They're both positive. So in the positive X and Y direction, we're going to get 60 inches because we're in architectural units, right? If I wanted it to go in the negative, I could have typed -60, -60. When I hit enter, 60 inches is of course 5 feet. So I have a 5 foot by 5 foot square, okay? I would say that is by far and away the most, my most used application of the absolute or relative coordinates in AutoCAD, right? I said this the first day. I don't use the coordinate system very much. I use direct entry to draw. It's good to know how the system works so that if you have to use those coordinates, you can. But this is probably one of the only applications I use it for. Daily, I guess I should say. Okay, let's do that one more time. And let me say this, right? I'm showing you all of these different methods of creating a rectangle, right? I can click and I can use an at absolute system, or relative system. I can type D, enter, and enter 2 dimensions. I can, let's see what I can do. Hold on. I'm forgetting the, there we go. I can click on dimension and enter 2 dimensions, right? Or if I wanted to, I could use 4 lines and I could create a rectangle with 4 lines. So I've got about 6 different ways that I can create the exact same thing in the exact same spot in AutoCAD, and really they're all correct, right? It's just a matter of you knowing that there's several different ways to do things and that you can, whatever you're most comfortable with, that's how you can generate the geometry, okay? Okay. Any questions about rectangles? Not yet? Okay. Let's see here. I want to make sure right. So another one of your assignments, so we have the object snap one, which you'll do. You're going to have this door arc exercise as well. Okay, so the arc or the door that we're going to generate in class, which will be our next exercise, you're going to create this as a homework assignment, right? And I look at this, right, and I think there's several different ways that I could create this, right? Let me get rid of some of this geometry on my screen here. Do we need a small break before we continue on? Do you guys want a small break? Or should we just keep going? Okay, good. You guys are in for the long haul, right? All right. Okay, so let's talk about how to create this door arc exercise, right? It's essentially kind of the same thing, but you're going to have to draw it from scratch. Yep.
Looking at the assignment, there's no door arc.
So there's just text. I think it just says in the book, doesn't it? Let's look.
Just says the 3 miles on it.
Let's look. I swear I added it in last night. So unless it's published without it in there. Door arc, right? OSNAP, circle widget, circle basketball court, and door arc, right? Look in your, yeah, I didn't have the PDF right there. Yeah, okay. Sometimes it doesn't, when I put, Canvas doesn't always work the first time. Let me just say that. Especially if you use the app. The app is great, you can look stuff up, right? But I was having a lot of trouble last semester with one specific person where I would publish something and his phone app wouldn't update immediately. So if there's something wrong, just let me know, right? So that I can look at it, because sometimes it is funny. All right, so let's look at this this door. You know, it's similar to the door arc exercise, right? And I'm not gonna do the whole thing. I'm just gonna talk through how you could go about doing it, right? You could create this wall using rectangle, right? So, well, maybe I will go through a little bit of it. I could click on rectangle, and I could come down here and click, and I could type at. In the X direction, this is 48 inches, right? And in the Y direction, it's maybe 4.5, right? There's one way of creating that wall system. Another way of creating the wall system is using the line tool. Click, move in the direction I want to go, making sure my ortho is on, 48, enter, 4.5 inches, enter. I don't even have to type 48 again. I can just line these up using that extension, object tracking, right? Where I touch and I don't click, I just touch, click, and then click to close it, right? So there's 2 ways I can draw that wall system. And then I can measure it to make sure it's correct. DIST, enter. Click, click. Yep, 4 foot. Enter to do distance again. Click, click. Yep, 4.5 inches, right? Okay, so there's a couple of different ways that I immediately could use rectangle, or I could use line to generate those walls, right? Okay. Let's see. There's going to be a space here. It's tricky, right? Can anybody think of how we could make that space right now? Yeah, it's good. So we don't really know a whole lot, right? But we do know how to draw lines and rectangles and all that good stuff. So what I could do to get that 3 foot gap is I could use the line tool, L for line, click, draw a 3 foot long line, 3 foot, enter. And that essentially made that 3 foot opening. But you're thinking, well, there's a line there though now, right? But I can delete that line really easily. So, you know, one thing in AutoCAD you're gonna kind of find out really early is that you a lot of times will draw extra geometry to create what you're really trying to draw, and then go back and delete stuff out, right? So I draw extra lines to then draw the lines that I'm actually going to keep, right? And that's not wrong, right? Lines are free. We can use as many as we want. We just have to remember to delete them when we don't need them anymore. So now I could use my line tool, L for line, click, and I could type 4 1/2, enter. 48 inches, right? I'm going back and forth, 48, enter. I need to move upward again. My ortho's on. If I wanted to turn ortho off, I would press F8, but why would we want to do that? F8 again, and it's back on. Click, or not click, sorry, touch it, and I hover over here. Oop, didn't quite get it that first time. Click, click, escape. And now I'm going to click and I'm going to delete that line, and I have a 3 foot gap. Okay. I could create this door panel, which is the next thing. I could create that using a rectangle. I could use lines to create it. Right now I'm somewhat inclined to use the line tool. Click. In my mind, I mean, you go back and forth. When you get working with this a lot, you'll be able to, figure it out for yourself. But I honestly use line and polyline a lot more than I do rectangle, just because with lines, I get a little bit more freedom because they're separate from one another, right? So I can delete them and move them and rotate and copy them all separately, where with a rectangle, if I needed to delete one piece of it, I'd have to explode it and then delete it, okay? So in my mind, I think what is, in the future, what will be easiest for me to manipulate? And in this case, it's probably a line. So I click, move in the direction I want to go, 3 foot, enter. Oop, it's too far, right? You're like, well, why is it 3 feet? Well, that door needs to be 3 foot in order to close up that 3 foot gap, right? I'm going to guess on how thick that door panel is. Or I could not be lazy and hit escape. Go up and type distance, D-I-S-T, enter, click, click. It's 1.5 inches in thickness. Let me delete a couple of these things. All this garbage geometry, right? L for line, click, 1 1/2. I don't have to put a unit, right, an inch mark, because AutoCAD assumes if I type in a number that it's inches. Enter. Zoom in, touch, and it snaps, right? Click, click, escape, and there we go. Okay. All right. So we have most of our door with very few tools so far, right? We know line, we know circle, we know rectangle, we know how to measure things. Kind of the last thing that is left here is the arc, okay? Everybody laughs when I say this, but arc is my nemesis. I don't like arc. I don't like using it, and I don't really ever use it in AutoCAD. But that's just my preference. I see its usefulness for other people, right? So if you want to use arc, that is totally fine. I'll show you how to use it. But this is kind of the one instance where I will go the long way and cause myself a tiny bit more work to do something because I don't like arc, because I don't feel like it works very well. But let's talk about arc, right? Because that's the only tools we know. For me, when I create a door like this, I'll use a circle, and oops, not that circle. I will draw a circle like this, and then we have a command called trim, and I'll trim these pieces off, and I'll make my door, right? Which causes me about 3 or 4 more moves other than an arc, but I feel like it works better for me, right? Personal preference, okay? Oh, he's stuck now. You're like, you're just trying to see the trim command, aren't you? Draw it with a circle, you mean? Well, let's go through arc first. We'll get there, don't worry. So I've drawn, let's draw this with an arc, okay? The first thing I want you to recognize with arc is that an arc is generated with a circle in mind, right? So if I have an arc that looks like this, okay, that arc was generated off the midpoint of a circle, right? So at this point, if you had like a little compass or something, you would draw an entire circle around that, right? So when you draw an arc and it asks for a center point, it is asking for the center point of that arc, okay? So I just want to make that pretty clear. The other thing, and I'll be honest, I rarely use arc, and so I always forget the direction they go. Arcs generate according to the right-hand rule, okay? So what that means is, let me show you here real quick. So if I start down here, click, 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 you see how it can form in different directions? This one's a little bit more free, but if I start going this direction to there, did you see how it formed on opposite sides, depending on where I started and stopped it? If I start up here and I move downward, right, which is effectively going clockwise, it forms right there, right? And I can change it, but oh, now I forgot which way I went. Did I go this way? If I go the opposite direction, See how it forms the other direction, right? So arcs form in opposite directions depending on which direction you create them in. So let me just say this. They are formed according to the right-hand rule, whether you're moving clockwise or counterclockwise, which I feel like is actually quite confusing in AutoCAD. So if it forms the wrong direction, just draw it the other way, right? Just a little informal advice, right? So the arc command is here. We have a lot of different arcs, right? We have 3-point, we have start, center, end, we have start, center, angle, we have start, center, length, we have start, center, start, end, angle, right? We've got a bunch of them. And so I'm just gonna go over maybe, we'll start with start, center, end, and I wanna do start, center, length, and then I think we'll probably do start, end, radius. I'm gonna do 3 of these, and it will give you the general idea behind an arc so that you can use any of these other ones that you want to use, right? But generally the idea is you have a start point, you have an end point, and you have a center point, okay? And the center point is based off of the center point of a circle that is generating that arc, all right? Now if we think of that in terms of this door, right? Let me just do a circle very quickly here, right? If we think of that in terms of a door, right? If this were a circle and this were an arc, right? This would be the center point of the circle, and this would be the arc that is generated about the center point of that circle. Okay. Is that Jameson? In and out. Is anybody still having trouble with their computers, getting AutoCAD on their computers or anything? Oh, you have a Chromebook though, right? Did he help you with that at all? Okay, we should have probably grabbed him. Bring it in with you on Wednesday, and I'll tell him you're coming in, and he can look at it.
Okay, should I just show up early?
Yeah, I would just come a few minutes early.
Okay.
He helped, there was another student last semester with the Chromebook, and he helped her get it working.
Alright, cool.
Yep.
Mine just violently crashes.
It does?
Violently crashes.
With the smoke.
No, it makes that like noise. It's just like and it just shuts off my laptop.
Is it a fairly new computer?
I just got it. I just barely got it last year.
Oh,
And it's just crashing
I
on
don't
me.
know why.
that's weird. I would bring it in. So do you have more than one antivirus software on there?
I only have one.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say that sounds like something like that is happening, honestly. Bring it in and he'll help you with it as well. Yeah, just bring it in a little bit early on Wednesday. Yep.
Well, I just
It's usually pretty helpful. All right, so let's talk about arcs. Okay, so I'm gonna initiate the arc command. We'll talk about start, center, and end arc, which I feel like is somewhat the easier of all the easiest of the arcs, okay? So I click on arc and it says specify the start point of an arc or the center. So you can choose where you want to start. But if I just click, the first click will be the start point. So the start point will be over here, click. The center will be the center of the circle the arc is generated from, which would be here, click. And then the end will be up here, click. Okay. I use the start, center, end. And honestly, they're just and all of these arcs, they're just using this, like different names for kind of the same things in the command, right? So we have start, center, angle. Let's delete that. Start, center, angle. Okay. Start, click, center, click. Angle is going to be the end, or you could also type 90 degrees, 90, enter, and it creates a 90-degree angle, right? So I'm going to select this and hit delete. If I wanted to do start, center, angle with something like 45 degrees, start, click, center, click, the angle could be 45, enter, and it only generates that arc up until 45 degrees and then it stops, right? So you can enter a numeric angular dimension, and there you go. Did somebody just say that was cool? Who was that? Just kidding. Nobody wants to fess up. Okay. We have start, center, length, right? You guys seeing a pattern? We have start, click, center, click, length. My length is going to be my I guess what you maybe would call the chord length, right? Click. So let me redo that. Arc, start, center, length, start, click, center, click, right? And whatever I could, you know, whatever length I want essentially to generate. Do you see that arc length is happening? It's going to go to wherever I specify. Click. Okay. This is a pretty easy application and it works pretty well with the door, right? Because I have a very defined start, I have a very defined center, and I have, you know, generally a defined end, right? So specifying these points here is very clear and it works really well, right? Where I sort of, again, I don't use arc very much. I just don't feel like it functions, and I don't feel like it functions because when I'm out in space, you know, I generally will get something like this, and it creates this very, you know, very arced circle. And usually the way that if I do end up using arc, the way that I end up using it is I generate one, and then I select it, I click on it, and I use these little grips, click, to stretch it where it needs to go, right? Which I feel like defeats the whole purpose of it. I feel like if a command doesn't work the first time, then it's kind of useless for me, right? I don't want to have to do more than one or two alterations to it to make it function, okay? But for your assignment, and you will be using this to draw a few things. Oh, we're not to the one yet. We'll talk about, there's another exercise that's coming up here pretty quick, but it's not this week. There will be another exercise where you will use arcs to generate some little drawing blocks, but we're not going to worry about it just yet. Okay. For now, really, you know, you're going to be using this in your assignment to generate the door, right? Which you all can draw the walls, you can draw the door panel, and then to draw the arc, I would just come up here. I think the easiest one to use is start, center, end, click, start, click, center, click, end, click, and there you go. Okay? Any questions on that?
With the endpoint, do you usually aiming for like midpoint or where on this?
So on this specific example, it will be, I kind of cheated a little. It would be that point right there. It'd be that endpoint, yeah. Okay. All right. Let's see here. Okay. I just wanted, so I'm going to go over the next commands that I wanted to talk about today are going to be modification commands. And I'm going to go over them very quickly once today, and then I'll go over them again when we start class next time, so that you know, I'll give you a chance to use them a little bit. I don't expect you to know them completely by next time, so we'll go over them again before we start our layers assignment. But I just wanted to give them to you in case you got ahead on your assignments and you wanted to use them to draw the basketball court, which is coming up, right? Which won't be due for another probably week and a half. But I'll go through these commands very quickly. And then we'll, you know, kind of the formal lecture will be next week, because I think you guys are probably empty, right? Or you're full, maybe you're full. So let's,
we're just doing the O-snap drawings and
door arc, O-snap, and then the circle widget and the basketball court. So there's 4 of them.
and are you just gonna upload the ARC one?
Well, the manual is online already. Remember that? So this book is under assignments. If you go right here, it's there. So it's in that book. Yeah. Yep. Okay.
And all the assignments are.
They're all in there. Yeah. I used to post the PDFs before I gave out the entire PDF. So it's, I mean, I guess it's nice to have it in the assignment, but they're all in the PDF that's posted. So. All right. So hold on. Let me get back to my schedule here. Okay, January 20th. Okay, move, copy, and offset So I'll go over these three modification commands, okay? Move. Move is exactly how it sounds. It allows you to move geometry, okay? Modification commands, again, you know, when you're drawing something, you initiate the command, you look at the command line for, you know, how to define it, and then you execute it, right? When you're using a modification command, you're going to select the objects to be modified, or you can initiate the command and then select. But the idea is that you're going to select and initiate the command, you're going to give some definition, and then you're going to execute it, right? So again, these commands, they don't vary that much from command to command, and you use the same process to move through them, right? So if I wanted to move something, I'm going to look over here under my Modify tool palette, still under the Home tab, Move, okay? And there's two ways I can choose to initiate the move command. I can select the objects I want to move, and then I can initiate move. Click. Okay? Or, I'm going to hit escape. I can click on move. I can select objects that I want to move, and when I'm done selecting, I can hit enter to kind of solidify that selection set, right? So I'm going to initiate and then select. When I'm done selecting, I hit enter. Or I'm going to select my objects, initiate the command, and then give it some definition, okay? Both ways are valid. You can do it either way. They're both correct. It doesn't matter which way you do it, okay? You'll get the same result. So I can click on move, but again, just like any other command in AutoCAD, there's always 4 different ways you can initiate a command, right? So I could also type M, enter. Or I could type MOVE, enter, right? And when I initiate the command, if I'm unsure of what to do next, because I knew I had to initiate it, but I forgot what to do next, I can come down here to the command line and it says select the objects. Okay, well, I can pick, click, I can selection window, click, I can blue selection window, okay, I pick or select the objects in any manner that I'm most comfortable with to select all of the things that need to be moved, okay. When I'm done selecting, I hit enter. Enter, right? I have to tell AutoCAD, hey, these are the items. I'm done selecting the items. Only move these items, right? So I initiate, I select, I hit enter to set that selection, and it's going to ask me to specify a base point, okay? So the way that most moves or offsets or rotates or anything having to do with any type of movement in AutoCAD, the first thing that you need to do is specify a point that I'm going to move from. So you pick a stationary point that's called the base point, and sometimes it matters where it is, sometimes it doesn't, but you're going to establish a stationary point and then say 6 feet from here, right? Now let me show you what I mean by it may matter where it is and it may matter not, right? If I click a base point here, click, and I say move this over 10 foot, 10 foot, enter. Moves it over 10 feet, right? I'm going to hit undo. M for move, select, enter. I could also pick up here in nowhere land, right? Click, move in the direction I want to go. You notice my ortho's turned off, so if I move and I type a dimension, then it's going to move it at an angle. So I'm going to turn my ortho on by pressing F8, F8, 10 foot, enter, right? You might not have known it. I'm going to draw a little line right there to kind of show that, hello, I'm going to draw a little line that shows where that movement ends. Move it back, 10 foot, enter. I grab this, again, M for move, enter. Now if I click down here, click, move in the direction I want to go, 10 foot, enter. Right? It doesn't really matter where I am on the screen when I click that base point, as long as I pick a point that becomes a stationary point that I then measure that 10 feet off of. Okay? So it's hey, establish a datum, and then we're going to move 10 feet off of this. All right? And that's how move is going to work. M for move, enter. Select the items I want to move, enter. Click, move in the direction you want to go, 10 foot, enter. All right, you can move anything in AutoCAD. It doesn't matter what it is. Any series of lines, blocks, dimensions, text, anything in AutoCAD that exists in AutoCAD can be moved, okay? You can use a pick, click, escape, escape. You can use a selection window, click, and I let go of my mouse and I drag over the selection, click, right? I can escape, escape. Use the click blue selection window, right? M for move, enter, click, click, right? M for move, enter, select, enter, click, click, move. I can move dimensionally by, moving in the direction I want to go and typing a dimension. I can also just move by clicking twice, right? Non-dimensionally, okay? Let's see, move, copy. Copy works in the exact same manner as move, right? I'm going to initiate the command, select what I want to move to copy, and then I'm going to either just click to copy it or I'm going to enter a dimension, okay? So if I wanted to, for example, copy this rectangle, I would select it, click on move, click, specify a base point, and it says that my cursor specify a base point, but it also down here at the command line says specify a base point. Click, move in the direction I want to go, and I can either click or type in a dimension. 10 foot, enter, right? I could select the object. Oh, did I just do move again? I'm sorry. I meant to copy. See, it's exactly the same, right? I'm going to click on copy, click, pick a base point, click. Wherever I click, 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 escape, escape, and I'm copying, okay? Copy is another one of those commands, just similar to the line command where when I continue to click, right, the command continues. It's called a multiple copy. So when I select an object, copy, click a base point, it could be on the object, it could be over to the side, click, 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 escape, escape, or I could select an object, copy, click, move in the direction I want to go, oh, but I want it to be straight, so I'm going to turn ortho on, F8, I could type 5 foot, enter, and it copies it over 5 feet, okay? So we have move, we have copy, and again, we'll go over these again, right? So don't worry too much. I just wanted to introduce it today, so if you wanted to play around with it, you could. I have one more command I want to talk about today, and then we'll stop, and that's called offset, right? So here's a really good example of offset. Offset will allow you to make a copy of an object, so it's kind of a copy command, but it will allow you to make a copy that is offset from the initial object a certain amount of space. Right? So this is a command where if you needed to create a wall and you have the top line, how do I get the bottom line? Well, I could copy it down, right? I select it, copy. I'm going to click on that endpoint, click, copy down to there. There's one way of creating a wall, right? Sorry, let me just draw one more over here. Another way is I could use the offset command. I could take this line and offset it the same distance here, which I'm going to measure it, DIST, enter, 4.5 inches. I could copy this down 4.5 inches, or I could offset it down 4.5 inches, okay? Offset is this little icon right here, offset, click, okay? Down here at the command line it says specify the offset distance. There's two ways I can specify an offset distance. I can type in a dimension, 4 1/2 inch. Enter. I'm going to click on the object to offset, click on the side to offset, and do you see how it previews? So when I click, I have a 4.5 inch offset. And it's continuous. Click, 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 click. And I don't just have to offset that initial object. I could do this object. Click, 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 click. Isn't this fun, right? Lots of fun, right? Click, click. Click, click. Okay. Isn't that nice? Escape, escape, right? So if I wanted to create, now I'm lost in where I was at. There we go. I wanted to create that wall. I could copy it down 4.5 inches. I could draw a rectangle. I could draw 4 lines, or I could offset and then add the two end lines, right? So OFFSET, offset, 4 1/2 inches, enter. Select the object to offset. Click. Specify a point on the side. Well, do I want it this side or do I want it that side? Click. Escape, escape. Well, I need to finish off these ends, so I could just come up here to line, click, 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 escape, escape, and I entered to reinitiate the line command, click, click, escape, escape. Ooh, I hate the dynamic input, right? I'm going to come down here to the dynamic input mode, click it off, and go back to where I was, right? I'm not, you know, when I look at your drawings, I look at them to make sure that they're complete, right? That you have all the geometry in there. I look at them to make sure that your lines are straight, right? So if you had ortho on, right, I'm looking at that kind of thing. I don't really care if you use, you know, rectangle, line, or offset to generate your rectangles, right? I think that's just kind of part of you learning how to use AutoCAD and what you're most comfortable with. So when I'm looking for missing geometry, crooked lines, and things, what was the third thing I said? I've already forgotten. Anyway, I want straight lines, dimensionally, and that they're dimensionally correct, right? So I think the biggest thing that I see in beginning students' assignments, just so that you have a little warning, is that I see people not switching their units into the right units, right? So you accidentally draw your whole assignment in decimals. And you think, oh, I drew, you know, you submit it. Well, it's 12 times too small, right? So that's going to be the number one thing that I see with beginning students. The second thing that I see a lot of is eyeballing. We don't like to eyeball, right? So make sure that you have ortho on and that your lines are actually straight. Don't just kind of try and approximate a straight line. Turn ortho on, right? Because when you go out and you work professionally, those are things that people notice, right? They may forgive you for not knowing a whole lot when you're first starting out working, right? But if you're a sloppy drafter and you don't pay attention to straight lines and dimensionally correct, and they're not going to appreciate that. So missing lines, make sure things are dimensionally correct. I don't really care, you know, how you get there as long as you do, all right? Your assignment, we'll stop there. It's a lot. We'll go over some of it again on Wednesday when we meet again. But your assignment will be the O-snap, circle widget, and the basketball court. And I added in the door exercise. Okay, so within the actual assignment, I don't know why I left it off the schedule. Within this, let's look at that. So O-snap, circle widget, basketball court, door exercise. Here are 3 of them, and then the 4th, which is the door exercise, that'll just be in your book, okay?
What age? Because I'm trying to look for it.
The door, in my book, it's 2-11, but it might be, let's look at,
PDF is 133.
133.
it's what, on 133?
On the PDF.
Quite a difference between,
I think it's just got everything in the back, in the way back of the book.
that's weird. Okay. Is everybody, so these files, I want them all separate, so you'll be submitting 4 files for this one. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. So when we meet again on Wednesday, we'll go over some of these commands, you know, so that everybody's clear on that. We are going to start also talking about, I believe we're going to start talking about layers, if I'm right. Let's look. Layers, yeah. So we'll talk about layers, which will add another, you know, added complexity to AutoCAD, but it's good. And if you guys are having trouble with these drawing exercises, we can go over some of them in class, okay? So try and get started on them so at least you can ask questions if you have problems drawing, and we'll go over it in class, okay? All right.
And the other one was in Wednesday.
Is that what Canvas says? Let's look. I'd like to just say yes. I can't remember all of the assignment, all of the 24th, so Wednesday. Yep. Okay. Thanks, guys. That was a lot today.